Big Halloween sale starting this Friday the 13th.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Hey everyone, and welcome to today's video for an Episode 9 theory. In Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, we will get the final conclusion to the entire Skywalker saga as we know it. Anakin Skywalker's story will be told and complete. As George Lucas always said, the story is about Anakin, even when Luke was the shining light in Return of the Jedi, and well, the whole original trilogy as a complete saga. Luke was merely the catalyst to the main star, the chosen one, which is Anakin. Regardless of how iconic Luke was and how much the story focused on him and his arc as a character, in the end, it was Anakin who brought balance to the Force. Living over half of his life as the evil Darth Vader, Anakin returned in the end to save his son and the galaxy from the Emperor, as he died to pass on to the netherworld of the Force. Through his act of sacrifice and his death, he was seen as an icon of hope and good for all that knew his story. Darth Vader was no more, only now was Anakin Skywalker. The same thing, I think, will happen for Kylo Ren. And now I'm going to explain how his story is like Anakin's. I believe the sequel trilogy will most likely mirror the events of the prequels and the originals if you guys haven't noticed some similarities already. Kylo was the young boy with the mighty Skywalker bloodline. Luke says this in Episode 8. He was taken from his mother, voluntarily, of course, but nevertheless taken from his mother like Anakin was, taken from his to be trained in the ways of a Jedi. Qui-Gon was supposed to be Anakin's master, but then it was later Obi-Wan by default. Luke plays the role of Obi-Wan here, and little Ben plays Anakin. The two bonded through their adventures scouring the galaxy for hidden holocrons, texts, and relics of the Jedi and past Force users. Luke eventually opened up his school, and Ben joined, becoming his pupil student. Their adventures must have touched on some similarity as master and apprentice, just like Obi-Wan and Anakin. Kylo turned into and lived as the tyrant who forced Luke away from being a Jedi after he set fire to his temple and killed all the pupils under him. Just like how Anakin helped execute Order 66 and raided the Jedi Temple with the 501st. Kylo also had some help with him during Luke's temple massacre. This can be noted in the books. Kylo led the First Order under his master, Supreme Leader Snoke. Anakin led the Empire under his master, Darth Sidious. Anakin's reasons to turn to the dark side were his lust for power and to save Padme from death. Kylo's reasons, while they're not all that evident just yet, were for the lust of power and to connect with his grandfather. Vader controlled the Empire through Sidious's bidding with his sheer power and emanating fear that he struck into his enemies. Kylo is doing, or trying to do the same thing under Snoke. Snoke is now dead, but I still don't believe that he was the full puppet master behind all of this, especially now with Sidious actually returning, or should I say, revealing himself after this whole time. After everything Vader did, there was still good in him, much like how Luke reiterated this to Vader. Rey does the same to Kylo. In the end, it was Anakin's sacrifice that saved the day and earned our love for him once the mask came off. He was just a human, after all. He makes mistakes and has faults like the rest of us. Although, of course, Vader's mistakes and wrongdoings were atrocious and pure evil. In the movie and story, however, it allowed us to accept his redemption to the light side as a good guy, and negated his wrongdoings of the past. We were able to look past it, and so is Luke. His death was the only way we could forgive him, because there is nothing more precious to each one of us than our own lives. So to sacrifice that for the love of someone else shows purity. I believe Kylo will follow the same path. His evil ways will only be redeemed by his sacrifice in the end to save the heroes of the story, and thus making him the mightiest hero of all of them. Bendemption, I'm going to call it, and I think I've heard that term swung around a few times here. Kylo will be redeemed through his act of sacrifice to save the others. Now, what would cause Ben to sacrifice his own life? Well, it could be as simple as jumping in front of a bullet, so to say, or a blaster to save Rey, or someone vital to the story's endgame, or it could be something as intricate as Palpatine possessing his very body, and the only way to kill him for good, before he assimilates his soul and powers with Ben, harnessing his full Skywalker abilities with the Senate, would be to make Rey kill him. I could see it being an emotional and extremely climactic moment at the end of the film, very tense, where Kylo is engulfed with the spirit of the Emperor and can only control his actions for a few seconds before it's too late. Kind of like, the werewolf complex, where the werewolf warns those near him to evacuate because once the full moon hits him, he won't be able to control himself anymore. He'll become a wild animal, vile, monstrous, and powerful beyond measure. So it's possible that in this in-between transitionary stage where Palpatine is taking hold of Kylo's body and mind, and everything is about to take effect, we still have this bit of Ben holding on as hard as he can, urging Rey to do it, to kill him and the spirit of Palpatine within his body forever. Rey, in the end, most likely, well, at least in this theory, does, and Kylo dies to save the entire galaxy once and for all from all of the evil that is Darth Sidious. This is how I think Kylo will die. Now, if he could be resurrected by a Force ghost, perhaps, well, that's something that hasn't been really dived into too deeply at all into canon. The powers of Force ghosts have only been really shown to us in The Last Jedi, and we got to see things that we have never really seen before, such as Yoda striking the Force tree, tapping Luke on the face with his cane. I mean, these aren't things that are supposed to be really happening because, well, he's dead and he's a Force ghost. But this also raises the question as to how Obi-Wan sat on the log on Dagobah in Return of the Jedi if he was a ghost. Shouldn't he just be going through everything as well? I think Force ghosts can evolve just like Jedi can in the real world. I believe when you're a Force ghost, you are completely made up of the Force. Now, in the canon novel, from a certain point of view, Qui-Gon Jinn shows up to Obi-Wan in his original form as a human. So, the powers of Force ghosts are something that are obviously going to be, at least I hope, dived into more in detail as we go on with the story of the Skywalker saga, or at least as we go on more into the story of Star Wars as a whole. Maybe in the movies that we'll be following afterwards, or the comics or books or things like that, in which of course I'll be making videos about them. However, in the case of Kylo dying and being resurrected, could it be possible that a Force ghost would sacrifice their life and their Force essence to never return, to cease to exist, in order to bring back someone from the dead? Perhaps this could be a way that Kylo could return if he were to die. Could Luke appear and sacrifice himself to go into Kylo and bring him back to life? This would be, again, the ultimate sacrifice. Or what if Anakin were to do this? How would the fans feel about that? Now here's a theory that I want to throw on you guys. I know what you're thinking. Another one. Well, if Kylo were to die and the Force ghosts were to resurrect him in some sort of way, then that means that they can obviously interact with the living, as we've seen in The Last Jedi, but obviously to a much more in-depth degree. So if that's the case, then what if they were to return themselves and to fight Palpatine? That would be kind of interesting. It would be really weird, but it would be really interesting to see. Imagine Anakin returning, and Obi-Wan and Yoda and all of them returning to fight Palpatine on a 1-on-10 or 20 duel. Kylo's arc, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating in Star Wars, because its wavelength is non-linear. It's so up and down and all over the place. And it's relatable to humans because, well, we never really stay the same. Our minds are always changing and our personalities are always changing as we go on with time and learn new things about ourselves. Kylo starts out as the good guy, then wants to become the bad guy for whatever reason, and then in the end will go on to be the good guy, as he always was. I feel like you always end up being what you always were to begin with. And I think Kylo this entire time has had the good within him. We even see it when he's struggling to kill his father in Episode 7. I think he's doing these dark things to allow himself to use the dark side for some certain purpose. And what that purpose is, well, I'm not entirely sure yet, but I believe he has some sort of plan. And I think it's bigger than just being evil and taking over the galaxy. I think there's someone he's trying to get to, and it could very well be Palpatine, and not his grandfather. Now, as for the topic of Force ghosts dying fully and never ceasing to exist again in order to resurrect the dead or something like that, that's a video that I want to cover in another video at a different time. So definitely stay tuned for that one. I hope you enjoyed this theory. At the end of the day, I have no clue what Episode 9 will be like, so before it comes out, this is the only fun time to have theories and speculations and just have fun with it. So let me know what you think. Do you think Kylo will die? Do you think he will be redeemed? Do you think he'll be the good guy in the end? Or do you think he'll continue to be the angry, tyranty little villain that he is? And by little, I mean, compared to Vader. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Hit like on this theory if you enjoyed it, and comment down below. Until the next episode, remember, the the Force will be with you, always.